Imagine losing someone you love, a parent, a partner, a child. In your culture, you'd bury them, maybe cremate them, visit a grave, keep a photo on the wall. Now imagine a different culture, where the most loving thing you could do for that same person was eat them. Not out of hunger, not out of hatred, out of love. That sentence sounds impossible, but it's real, documented, and stranger than almost anything else in human history. Let's start with the proof. Real proof, not speculation. In Maszycka Cave in Poland, researchers examined 63 human bone fragments from a site nearly 18,000 years old. Over 68% showed clear signs of human handling, cut marks, scraping, deliberate fracturing to reach the marrow inside. Skulls had been opened, brains removed. The pattern wasn't random damage from time or animals, it was butchery, and it happened fast. Researchers found no evidence the bodies were left to decompose first. The processing began shortly after death. This wasn't an isolated case either. Similar evidence has turned up across Europe, stretching back over 600,000 years in some early hominin sites. So the obvious question is, why would anyone do this? The easiest answer is survival. Ice Age Europe was brutal. Food was scarce for long stretches, and when the choice was starvation or eating the dead, some people chose to survive. This kind of cannibalism has a name: survival cannibalism. It's documented across history, not just prehistory. Shipwreck survivors, besieged cities, stranded expeditions. When starvation is close enough, the taboo can break. But survival doesn't explain everything researchers have found, because some cannibalism wasn't about hunger at all. At Gough's cave in England, human skulls dating back around 15,000 years were shaped into cups, carefully, precisely, not hastily butchered for meat. That level of care suggests these bones weren't treated as leftover food. They were treated as something meaningful. This is where the story shifts from horror to something much stranger: cannibalism as an act of respect, specifically toward people you loved. Among the Wari people of the Amazon, anthropologists documented a practice called endocannibalism, eating the flesh of your own dead, not your enemies. When a loved one died, some Wari communities would cook and consume parts of the body, not out of hunger, but as a final act of care. Anthropologists who lived among the Wari recorded something surprising. The people who ate the flesh weren't strangers. They were often close relatives, and they described the act through tears as one of the hardest, most sacred things they'd ever done. In their belief system, leaving a body to rot alone in the ground was the disrespectful choice. Consuming it and keeping the person close was the loving one. The Yanomami people of the Amazon practice something similar even today. After cremation, the ashes are mixed into a plantain soup and consumed by the family. It's not about eating human flesh directly. It's about not letting the person disappear completely, keeping them, quite literally, a part of you. From a modern Western lens, this sounds disturbing. But flip the framing for a moment. In many cultures, leaving a body to be consumed by insects and bacteria underground is simply normal. Not eating it is the default we were raised with, not a universal moral law. Anthropologists have a term for this kind of blind spot: ethnocentrism, judging another culture's practices only through the lens of your own. And once you understand what these communities believed, endocannibalism stops looking like horror. It starts looking like an extreme, deeply literal form of grief. It's worth saying, too, modern culture isn't as far from this as it feels. Some people today keep a loved one's ashes in a locket worn against their skin. Others have ashes pressed into a diamond or mixed into a tattoo ink and worn under the surface of their own body. The instinct is the same instinct the Wari had. Don't let them disappear. Keep them physically close, even after death. We just found a less literal way to do it. Not everyone practiced eating the dead out of love, though. There's a darker side, too. Some cannibalism throughout history was exocannibalism, eating the flesh of enemies, not loved ones. In Papua New Guinea, some tribal conflicts historically involved consuming parts of a defeated rival, not for nutrition, for dominance. A way of erasing an enemy completely, body and identity both. The Maszycka Cave evidence in Poland has actually been interpreted this way too. Some researchers believe it may represent violence between rival groups, not starvation and not love. So the exact same act, eating human flesh, could mean two almost opposite things, depending on who was doing it and why. An act of love in one culture, an act of domination in another, desperation in a third. That's the part modern people tend to miss. We picture cannibal as one single image, usually a villain from a horror movie. But the real history is far more complicated and far more human than that. There's actually a strange twist to this story too. For decades, some anthropologists doubted how common ritual cannibalism really was. A controversial book in the 1970s argued cannibalism had been wildly exaggerated by colonial explorers, used as propaganda to paint other cultures as savage. That argument sparked decades of debate. But modern forensic evidence, actual cut marks, actual bone damage under microscopes, has settled at least part of it. People really did consume other humans. The debate now isn't whether it happened. It's about why in each specific case. Which brings us back to where we started. The word cannibal carries so much weight today that it's hard to even say it neutrally. But for a large stretch of human history, across very different cultures, on different continents, eating someone you loved after they died wasn't a monstrous exception. Sometimes it was survival, sometimes it was warfare, and sometimes it really was just how a family said goodbye and refused to let go. Thanks for watching. If this changed how you think about something that sounds simple on the surface, subscribe to Bone and Fire.